And future market winners, listen carefully, because what is happening around XRP right now is not noise. It is not coincidence, and it is absolutely not being explained honestly by mainstream crypto media. This is one of those rare moments where the market whispers before it screams, and if you blink, you miss it. Because behind the sudden volatility, behind the fake confusion, behind the coordinated narratives, there is a very specific reason why XRP is reacting right now, and it ties directly into power, liquidity, and control on a global scale. And yes, this changes everything, because while retail is being distracted with meme coins and short-term hype, institutions are positioning, regulators are recalibrating, and legacy financial giants like BlackRock, the IMF, the BIS, and yes, even the SEC are all orbiting the same uncomfortable truth that XRP sits at the center of a system they cannot fully stop anymore, only delay, and the market is starting to sniff that out in real time, which is why you are seeing strange price behavior, sudden volume anomalies, and sentiment whiplash that makes no sense unless you understand what is really going on under the surface. And before I go any further, I need you to do something critical right now. Smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what we are about to unpack is being actively buried, suppressed, and distorted. And if you are hearing this now, you are early to information. Most investors will only understand after the move is already over. And ask yourself this extreme question as we set the stage. Why would XRP react before the news is officially confirmed? Why would liquidity shift quietly before headlines break? And why do the same institutions that publicly dismiss crypto keep showing up in the background of Ripple-related infrastructure discussions, sandbox programs, and payment corridors? This is not random. This is signaling, and in the next part, I am going to show you how the data, the authority figures, and the institutional breadcrumbs all point to a coordinated market reaction that is only just beginning. And when you see it laid out clearly, you are going to say, WTF, how did I not see this sooner? Now stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely breaks apart and the data starts exposing what the headlines refuse to say. Because when you strip away the emotion and look at timing, volume behavior, regulatory language shifts, and institutional posture, XRP stands out like a flare in the dark. And this is not opinion. This is pattern recognition at the highest level, because while Bitcoin and Ethereum react emotionally to macro news, XRP reacts structurally to policy signals, liquidity stress, and regulatory chess moves. And that distinction is everything. Because just days ago, we saw unusual on-chain volume clustering around XRP corridors that historically activate before major announcements, not after. And the last times we saw this same behavior were during critical SEC procedural moments and behind-the-scenes banking pilot expansions. And here is where the authority comes in. Because Ripple executives are not random crypto founders tweeting hype. They are former regulators, former central banking advisors, people who have sat across the table from the IMF, the World Bank, and the BIS. And when Brad Garlinghouse speaks about regulatory clarity, he is not guessing, he is signaling. And when David Schwartz talks about scalability and liquidity, he is talking to an audience that includes sovereign-level financial infrastructure planners. And this matters because at the same time, the SEC has gone strangely quiet in its public tone around crypto enforcement language, while global bodies like the IMF are suddenly increasing their focus on cross-border settlement efficiency and tokenized liquidity rails. And let me ask you something extreme but necessary. Do you really think BlackRock filing for tokenization frameworks, the BIS publishing reports on interoperable ledgers, and Ripple expanding partnerships in Asia and the Middle East are all happening independently? Or is it more logical that the market is reacting early to coordination that cannot yet be announced publicly, because institutions move first, price reacts second, and headlines come last? And this is why XRP looks like it is under pressure one moment and aggressively defended the next, because accumulation does not look like hype. It looks like confusion, and retail misreads that every single cycle. And remember this, every major revaluation in financial history was preceded by denial from mainstream commentators, from gold in the 70s to tech stocks in the 90s. And now digital liquidity assets are entering that same phase, and XRP sits uncomfortably close to the plumbing of the system, which is exactly why it is attacked publicly and studied privately. And if this still feels unbelievable, Good, because disbelief is the emotional state that institutions rely on to build positions quietly. And in the next part, I am going to break down the specific catalyst forming right now and dismantle the fear, uncertainty, and doubt being deployed to keep you second-guessing while positioning accelerates. Good, because this is the part where the mask really comes off and the so-called uncertainty around XRP starts to look less like confusion and more like intentional misdirection, because catalysts do not always arrive as press releases. Sometimes they arrive as silence, as delays, as procedural language that most people ignore. And right now, XRP is sitting directly in the blast radius of several converging catalysts that the market is reacting to instinctively, even if commentators pretend nothing is happening. And the first catalyst is regulatory finality. Not headlines, not tweets, but structural closure. Because when legal processes move from noise to paperwork, price often moves before clarity is announced, and this is exactly what we have seen historically with XRP every time the SEC narrative shifts from aggressive posturing to quiet recalibration. And ask yourself this: why would the SEC soften tone while global regulators simultaneously accelerate digital asset frameworks? Why would the IMF talk about cross-border settlement inefficiencies at the same time? RippleNet expands quietly into emerging market corridors. And why would banks that once mocked crypto now demand tokenization pilots? And here comes the FUD defense, because the fear being pushed right now is carefully engineered. You are told adoption is slow, that banks are not using XRP, that Ripple is irrelevant, and that price action proves failure. But that narrative collapses under basic logic because infrastructure adoption does not look like retail hype. It looks like compliance, integration, testing, and delayed gratification. And this is why XRP does not move like meme coins. It moves like plumbing. Boring until it suddenly is not. And here is the uncomfortable truth most influencers will not say: XRP does not need your belief to function. It needs regulatory permission and institutional alignment. And those two things are moving into place right now, which is why the market reaction feels tense, compressed, and unstable, because compression precedes expansion. And the reason FUD is loud right now is because fear is cheapest before repricing. And look at who benefits from keeping sentiment low: not retail, not long-term holders, but entities that need liquidity without slippage, entities that cannot announce accumulation without moving price violently. And if you think that sounds conspiratorial, remember that this is how every commodity, currency, and strategic asset has ever been positioned in history: quietly first, loudly later. And in the final part, I am going to tie this all together into why price targets that once sounded insane are now being recalculated internally, and why the next phase could catch the majority completely unprepared. Now brace yourself, because this is where the conversation shifts from theory to consequence, from signals to numbers, and from comfort to confrontation. Because the reason the market is reacting right now is not because of speculation. It is because valuation models are quietly breaking, and XRP's price suppression narrative cannot survive in an environment where liquidity, utility, and regulatory clearance begin to align. Because XRP was never designed to be priced like a speculative tech stock. It was designed to intermediate value at scale. And when you understand that, the old price anchors become laughable, because if even a fraction of cross-border settlement volume begins touching XRP rails, we are no longer talking about pennies or dollars. We are talking about repricing to reflect throughput, velocity, and risk reduction. And this is why internal discussions reference numbers that sound insane to retail ears, because they are not comparing XRP to other coins. They are comparing it to trapped capital, nostro vostro accounts, and inefficient liquidity pools measured in the tens of trillions. And this is where the final warning comes in, because markets do not reward patience at the moment of transition. They punish hesitation. And when XRP moves decisively, it will not ask for permission. It will not wait for YouTube thumbnails to update. And it will not care if sentiment is still divided, because repricing events are violent, fast, and unforgiving. And the same voices telling you to wait for confirmation are the ones who will explain after the fact why it was obvious. And remember this: BlackRock does not chase retail confirmation. The IMF does not care about Twitter sentiment. And the SEC does not protect late entrants, they protect systems. And XRP sits directly at the intersection of all three, which is why the market reaction you are witnessing right now feels strange, compressed, and emotionally exhausting, because this is the calm before a structural shift. And the only real question left is not whether XRP is relevant, but whether you were paying attention before the window closes. Respected viewers who made it this far, understand this clearly. Moments like this are never comfortable, they are never obvious, and they are never celebrated in real time, because the market only rewards those who act when conviction is hardest and information is incomplete. And right now, XRP is sitting in that exact historical pocket where disbelief is high, narratives are fragmented, and positioning is happening quietly behind closed doors. And years from now, people will point back to this period and ask how anyone could have missed the signs, how the regulatory language shifted, how institutional bodies like the IMF and BIS aligned their messaging, how firms like BlackRock moved toward tokenization, and how Ripple kept building while critics kept shouting. And the answer will be simple. Most people were looking for permission instead of signals. And if there is one final thing you should take away from this entire breakdown, it is this. The market reacts before the headlines, price moves before understanding, and wealth transfers during moments of maximum confusion. And what you are seeing right now with XRP is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of a repricing narrative that does not care about consensus, comfort, or mainstream approval. And whether you agree with every detail or not, you cannot deny the pattern, the urgency, and the structural pressure building beneath the surface. And if this analysis forced you to think differently, if it challenged the narratives you have been fed, then you already know what to do. Stay informed, stay critical, and do not let engineered doubt steal your positioning, because when the market finally stops whispering and starts shouting, it will already be too late to ask why.